Good day. We're here with Arion Mapp, legal counsel at the Human Rights Commission, and we're here to talk about discrimination within the housing sector and how that relates to the Human Rights Commission. So as you guys will know, we've been doing this campaign around Bermuda's Home, talking about the commodification of housing and how that economic inequality kind of leads to the lack of available houses for people to live in. But how does this relate to your work that you're doing within the Human Rights Commission?
I think it overlaps, so I can't remember the exact statistic on what the millions are, but the right to adequate housing is frustrated by way of discrimination, which is, I think, the wedge then that overlaps with the work that we do. Housing, for the purposes of the Human Rights Act, is protected within Section 4. It relates to rental properties, it relates to commercial properties, such as, renting an office space. It creates to buying land, buying property, and what it does, it prohibits discrimination based on protected grounds, such as the person's black, the person is gay, the person is a woman, the person is a child, the person has a disability. These are things that are protected. So these groups of people can't be excluded, for example, from renting a house because they have a child, because they are a woman, because they are unmarried. I'm trying to think of the myriad of ways people describe it, because they're Bermudian, ways in which it's manifested here. And so it, I would say, overlaps directly with work that we do, and it's likely exacerbated by virtue of discrimination.
So what is for example, if a person has an issue with housing discrimination, what is the stages or steps that one can do when faced with that?
So if, for example, some of them have appeared really direct, and so someone, for example, sees an advertisement for a home, and they respond to the ad, they're told, yes, the place is suitable for children, or the place is suitable for a single male, the place is suitable for a couple or a young couple, things such as that. I would say those people should contact the Human Rights Commission. You could reach us at 295-5859. You can access through our website, humanrights.bm. Our email is intakes@humanrights.bm or info@humanrights.bm. You can come to our office. We're located 32 Victoria Street, Hamilton, in Milner Place. And the reason I would ask people to come to us is that we can speak through, for example, what did you experience? Does it appear as if you've been excluded because of a characteristic? So, for example, if you pitched up to view a house, you saw it, you liked it, they liked you, you go to sign the lease, and when you go to sign the lease, you bring your child with you, and they say, oh, sorry, we didn't realize you had a child. I don't intend to rent to someone with a child. You may have been discriminated against, and we would encourage people like that to come to us, because there very well may be a recourse available to you. Does that help?
Yeah. When dealing with these cases with clients, you often, I'd imagine, are talking with landlords about how they are feeling about being called to the Human Rights Commission. What is their response to being called and being investigated by the Human Rights Commission?
So, I don't say to be arbitrary, so I wouldn't call them clients. I call them complainants, and perhaps in the situation I just gave, it would be a landlord, maybe a respondent. Procedurally, it can look like a lot of things. One, their mediation services that we provide helps parties to it creates a forum essentially for parties to find a resolution, perhaps. But in using the scenario I described just now, what would usually happen is the experiences that the person went through are documented. Those would be sent to a respondent, being the potential landlord, or the prospective landlord. That landlord is entitled to provide a response. So, for example, the response could be, I simply don't want to rent to someone with children, or I have certain convictions that prevent ISA is the reason why I don't want to rent to someone of a different faith. I don't want to rent to someone who's unmarried. I just choose not to live next to someone who is gay or who's black. Those are things that very well may be provided by a landlord. I think educational engagements are probably a better forum, because when a complaint is running, we're processing it within the commission from the perspective of screening the complaint. Potentially there's an investigation done. A complaint such as that may also get referred to the Human Rights Tribunal for adjudication, where the independent tribunal would determine, has this person's human rights been contravened? Whereas then on the other side of it, in the educational arena, for example, we've had various lunch and learns where there are those forums where it may come up. It may, do I have to rent to everyone? Do I have to, can I exclude this person because they have children? Or I'm not comfortable living next to someone who's Muslim. Do I have to rent to them? And I think that creates a forum for advising people of what their obligations are and what their rights are. Something we often talk of is rights holders and duty bearers. And so the rights holder would be, for example, me. I'm going off to rent a place. I have rights to not be discriminated against because I'm black. The duty bearer, I would think, in this situation is the landlord who, when I pitch up saying that, oh yeah, I saw your ad for the 2-bedroom place, I'm interested. That they don't turn me away for that reason, saying, I prefer not to live next to someone who's black. Or, I've had bad experiences with Bermudians before, and I'm just not keen to rent to a Bermudian again. That is discrimination, right? It's very obviously discrimination, and it's also prohibited. And so I think the different arenas, perhaps mediation, for example, with the parties, the complaint avenue, I think, for proper accountability and enforcement of human rights, but also education, because I think there are instances where perhaps people believe they are entitled to do certain things that are done, and they're not. And I think our functions spill into all of the different places. One, helping parties to facilitate mediation, helping with education of the public, and assisting with respect to investigating complaints that are meritorious.
So what do you think is the importance of having such a provision within the Human Rights Commission? Many landlords, I would imagine, feel that they have the right to do whatever they want with their property. What would your response be to that?
You don't have the right to discriminate. You don't have the right to infringe upon the dignity and worth of another person. Do you have the right to select who do you wish to have as a tenant? Certainly. In the same way that you have the right to select who you wish to hire as an employee. I won't say there is no difference. There's some obvious differences there. But when we look at what I guess when you look at it in context, I'm looking at renting this place. Someone is coming to view the place or what have you, or rent the place, buy the place, whatever it is. I cannot exclude that person because of a characteristic. And the importance of that, I think, is seen and acknowledged within the employment realm, where employers know that they cannot exclude someone because they're Bermudian. We're not hiring Bermudians today, we're not hiring black people, we're not hiring women here. They recognize that. And I think something that would be helpful is that same application existing within the rental space or real estate space. Forgive me, I can't find the right characterization there, but that recognition, I think, is important because it will help people in knowing what they can do and what they can't do. And what you can't do is exclude someone because of a protected characteristic. It'll likely result in you being ending up with a complaint made against you and likely not being able to defend yourself.
So are there any weak spaces within the legislation currently that you would want to tweak or amend for greater protections against discrimination within the housing space?
Yes, so Section 44A, for example, is one that I would say enables discrimination. What it does is the protection is extended by way of Section 4.1 of the Human Rights Act. I can't recite it off the top of my head, but it relates to where someone is seeking to rent a property and let's say where someone is also renting a property. I think the way I've described it as well has always been in the context of a person seeking to rent somewhere. Discrimination also occurs when someone is renting somewhere. So for example, a person is currently renting and all of a sudden now something arises which results in the landlord harassing them. Maybe they have a child now that they've started living there. The landlord says, this place is no longer suitable for you, and so I'm terminating your lease. In that instance, they're terminating the lease because the person had a child, not for some other reason. That would be discrimination. But then provisions such as 44A, there's also two more, B and C. But if I speak about A is the one where, let's say for example, it's a main unit, 3-bedroom house, and there's a studio apartment attached to it. If what we're talking about in that scenario was that family lived in the studio apartment and the owner, or the owner lived on the property, or a member of the family lived in the main unit, they're protected. They're able to discriminate. They're able to say, I'm not renting to you because you're black. I'm not renting to you because you have children. I'm not renting to you because you're disabled. I'm not renting to you because you're gay. And the protection that's afforded to people in 4.1 is disapplied. And that seems incredibly contrary to human rights. It seems contrary to the preamble of the Human Rights Act, the purpose of the Human Rights Act, the purpose of that provision. And it's something that is not, it exists within, the way in which we have it is not, I would say, seen in other jurisdictions that are comparable to our Human Rights Act, predominantly Canada. But you can see some aspects which have some similarities with different language. But yeah, within ours, I think it's a 3 or less, a dwelling of 3 or less, which could, for example, be a 3-bedroom unit, a 2-bedroom, and a studio, or whatever the breakdown is. But that's one I think that is incredibly problematic. And again, I think it's contrary to the right to housing. It's contrary to the right to adequate housing. It's likely what results in generations of families living in one home, where it's a 3-bedroom home, where you have, 2 of your aunties are there, you're there with your cousins, your grandmother's there, and perhaps it isn't until one gets older that they realize that we actually didn't grow up in adequate housing. We were overcrowded. We didn't have, the basic necessities perhaps that we should have. And why? Because your mother had children that was then excluded from the rental market, basically.
Could you just lastly speak on the importance of human rights both in generally, as well as specifically why housing protections need to exist within Bermuda? You kind of touched upon it when you talk about the importance of ensuring that discrimination doesn't exist. But when we think about the after effects of discrimination, such as a person being made homeless, just could you touch upon why is it so important that human rights both exist within Bermuda in this framework against discrimination, as well as housing specifically?
It's, I'd say it's like a helpful springboard that goes off the Constitution, the right to life, the right to, not so much liberty, but in thinking about what does the right to life mean, a right to a life worth lived, and then I think of the Human Rights Act, some of the knock-on effects, the 3 main aspects of it, I often call them social areas, and what I mean by that is it protects you within the realm of renting, it protects you in the realm of employment, and it protects you in the realm of accessing services. There's some of the 3 main functions. We all, in a perfect world, have somewhere to go at night. We all have different places in which we access services, whether it be for help, for the grocery store, clothing, whatever, the gym, whatever other the services are, education, and the other being employment. Again, in most circumstances, a person is employed, and the benefit of human rights is you get to do those very basic things in circumstances where your characteristics are not a motivator for adverse treatment. And I've forgotten the second part of the question, but I'll ask you in a minute. But the importance, I think, of it is that it makes life worth living. And there are things that I think we have agreed over time, over hundreds, thousands of years, that these are the common things that we can agree on as to how people ought to be treated. And when you look at the different mechanisms that exist, the European Court of Human Rights, constitutions, Human Rights Acts, the Human Rights Framework, these are all things that I think support our humanity. And I would say that is the importance of it, that we recognize the humanity in each other when we're dealing with each other, when we're interacting with each other, when we're looking at hiring people, when we're looking at renting to people. While we are renting to people, how we're treating them. We're not treating them in a discriminatory manner, again, because of characteristics. Not so much talking about personality conflicts or things like that. It's just simply because this person is a different race, is from somewhere else that you're not from. The person's from Pakistan, and now I am treating them with disdain, with a lack of respect, being discourteous in circumstances where I wasn't doing that with my previous tenant who was from Bermuda or wherever. And same with the workplace, right? Like, I'm treating my colleagues with respect and dignity. I'm not treating them differently because they're women. I'm not treating them differently because they're of their age. I'm not treating them differently because of where they're from, because they have families or don't have families. None of these, I say arbitrary things, but these things that make us human are factors in who has value and who is not. And I think one of the, looking historically, one of the worst parts of humanity is how we treat people who are different. And just because someone is different, it has, created the, framework for vast groups of people to be slaughtered, to be eliminated, just simply for being what they are. I can't remember the second part.
No, that's
okay,
a great
very
answer.
cool.
That was a great answer, fantastic.
Right.
Thank you so much.
No problem. I
Those are
appreciate
very
you guys.
great answers, and yeah.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.